If in fact a calculation comes to you that you are satisfied with, would you then say, I'm for reparations?
The answer is it would depend on what it was and will it include Native Americans as well.
I'm not sure what Native Americans has to do with reparations for slavery, and I'm not even going to waste time pontificating over how ridiculous that statement was, because it gets worse. What I wanted to discuss today very quickly is this article that was written on the Huffington Post titled "Biden Releases Racial Equity Plan Amidst Reparations." Now, before we get too deep into this article, what I want to do first is go through Joe Biden's history of being anti-reparations. And that's why I don't support Joe Biden or anybody else that's running for political office. It doesn't matter if it's president of the United States or mayor or whatever the case is, but especially if they're Democrats. Because you see, for the last 50 years, we are talking half a century now, Black Americans have been voting majority Democrat, only to consistently receive nothing in return. For 50 years, we have been voting Democrat, and the racial wealth gap between blacks and whites have skyrocketed. For 50 years, you've been voting for Democrats, and your prison population has skyrocketed. So you're gonna have to explain to me why things are going to be different this time with Joe Biden. If you're not backing reparations or any specific tangibles for the descendants of American slavery to address their issues, I need you to explain to me why things are going to be different now. Now, when it comes to Joe Biden and reparations, it's not surprising that he omits reparations in his new plan for racial equality, because he's been anti-reparations for years. In 1975, when Joe Biden was asked about reparations, he replied this: "I don't feel responsible for the sins of my father and grandfather. I feel responsible for what the situation is today, for the sins of my own generation, and I will be damned if I feel responsible to pay for what happened 300 years ago." Now, never mind the fact that the sins of his generation is Jim Crow. Joe Biden was born in 1942. Jim Crow lasted from 1865 to 1965. By the time Jim Crow ended, Joe Biden was somewhere in his early to mid-20s. So when we're talking about the sins of his generation, the sins of his generation would be reparations for 100 years of strategic, state-sanctioned political and economic violence towards the descendants of American slavery. Not people of color, not minorities and marginalized groups, not black and brown. That was 100 years of state-sanctioned political and economic violence that was virtually exclusive to the descendants of American slavery. So if there were reparations to be paid out by way of his generation, it would be for that. But we're not even going to go there right now, because just very quickly as it pertains to this statement and this large 300-year number that he wants to throw out there, mind you, this statement that he made was in 1975. The last slave who died in America died in 1971, 4 years prior to that statement. Now, mind you, you can look at it if you want to and say, well, 1841 to 1971, this guy was, 130 years old? He lived an unusually long life. That shouldn't count. But then you go back to the fact that Joe Biden was born in 1942, but between the years of 1936 and 1938, the United States government was collecting slave narratives. If you go to the Library of Congress, you will find Born in Slavery, slave narratives from the Federal Writers Project, 1936 to 1938. This is a collection of interviews giving first-hand accounts of slavery by ex-slaves themselves. As late as 1938, Joe Biden was born 4 years later in 1942. So 4 years prior to Joe Biden's birth, the United States government was sitting here interviewing former slaves. Yet Joe Biden is talking about slavery as if it was 2,000 years ago. I just wanted to highlight that very quickly so you see how full of you-know-what Joe Biden actually is. But it gets worse. Now let's move into the present day discussion concerning reparations, and let's hear what Joe Biden has to say from the man himself.
No, but they look, they're not mutually exclusive. But I can't believe that whatever it is, the African American community would not support what I'm talking about. In addition to,
I don't think we have to. Let me ask you this then. Let me ask you this so we can move on because we've got to get some phone calls in as well. But let me ask you this then. If in fact a calculation comes to you that you are satisfied with, would you then say, I'm for reparations?
The answer is it would depend on what it was and will it include Native Americans as well.
I'm not sure what Native Americans has to do with reparations for slavery, and I'm not even going to waste time pontificating over how ridiculous that statement was, because it gets worse.
Vice President Biden, do you support reparations?
Look, let me, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of every 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America, and we should invest in them. Everybody will benefit from it, every single American, and you should get used to it. This is a nation of immigrants. That's who we are. That's why we're who we are. That's what makes us different, and we should invest in them.
Thank you, Mr. Biden. Senator Klobuchar, you had your hand up.
This man is very consistent and disrespectful, might I add, towards the conversation surrounding reparations. So if you're black, I don't know why you would actually be voting for Joe Biden, because if Barack Obama didn't do anything for you, I don't know what you believe Joe Biden is going to do. Now let's get into this article. The Biden plan to build back better by advancing racial equity across the American economy is full of technocratic proposals like tax credits, public-private partnerships, and low-interest loan programs that would indirectly benefit black people. It's short on ideas for more direct assistance, like compensation for slavery and the discriminatory policies that created persistent racial disparities in unemployment, criminal justice, and overall wealth. For years, congressional Democrats have proposed appointing a special commission to study the feasibility of paying reparations, but the proposal has never moved off the back burner. The vice president doesn't have a problem with the study, but he believes there are things we can do right now that we don't have to wait on a study to tell us that it will change the lives of black and brown people in America, a senior Biden campaign official said Tuesday on a conference call with reporters. I'm not sure what Brown has to do with the conversation circling reparations, but as you see, this is a common theme, not just with Joe Biden, but with all politicians at large. This refusal to address black Americans directly when it comes to issues concerning us. This constant need to include everybody else in the mix. People of color, black and brown, minorities, marginalized groups. It is a very strategic tactic by politicians to consistently dilute your issues by way of putting other people into it, therefore diluting the solution. To which you get programs like affirmative action, where white women were the #1 beneficiaries of this program, despite the fact that it was built off of the back of black pain, black struggle, and injustice towards black Americans. Now let's continue on. If there has ever been a good time to talk about reparations, it's now. The police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis promoted a global surge of Black Lives Matter protests, and polls show that voters increasingly recognize that black and brown people suffer from discrimination. Once again, this is supposed to be an article and conversation about the fact that reparations was omitted from Joe Biden's equality plan. But somehow in the discussion about reparations, we're talking about black and brown. We're doing this again. This is very consistent with politicians and really people in general across the board when you're talking about political writers. They always feel the need to throw other people into the conversation, despite the fact that they're not relevant to that conversation. Let's continue on. Racial resentment has long affected public attitudes towards government spending. However, and for decades, Democratic politicians, especially moderates like Biden, have hesitated to propose direct assistance when they could talk about tax credits instead. Other key policies in Biden's plan includes expanding a tax write-off for private equity firms that invest in businesses serving low-income areas, increasing funds for financial institutions operating in such areas, and making sure that small businesses can get help applying for any pandemic relief programs that might be running in early 2021. That last paragraph that I read right there is nothing more than the same old Democratic talking points, just slightly updated for this election cycle. They are not telling you anything new that they have not told you over the last half of a century. Yet you consistently vote for these people every election cycle, getting nothing in return. And with that being said, I'm going to close this one out. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as the bell notification next to the subscribe button. Social media links will be in the description below. Text tdhiphop to number 33222. And also don't forget to show love on Patreon if you have a genuine love and appreciation for the work that I put in on this channel. Until the next video, peace.